Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about the most misunderstood stat in the entire League of Legends game, the Ability Haste. During Season 16, I hit rank 1 by abusing Ability Haste stacking and snowballing an absurd amount of games. In this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly how to utilize Ability Haste to the high degree and why precisely it all works. Now, I'm gonna admit that I was a little bit selfish, that I postponed making this video actually until I hit rank 1. And now I'm actually gonna spill the beans, finally. So first, quick word from this video sponsor, Professor. One cool thing to help you focus consciously would be Professor, which is the sponsor of today's video, and it's absolutely free. It's a great tool that teaches you the game and helps you focus on certain aspects. You can look at your own stats, you can compare yourself to other people, you can even look up your own teammates, come up with plans, and practice your pre-lobby mentality, come up with different strategies, ideas, different contingencies for plans if they fail. Let's say if you want to play around your Kog'Maw based on the comp, but your Kog'Maw kind of looks like he's first timing, he doesn't know what he's doing, so sure, you're gonna play theoretically correct, but then modify if you see him completely failing in that game, and then modify the strategy to improve your win chance. That's just a very, very good outlook on the game. Also allows you to look at different professional player replays, which is incredibly valuable for you to become a better player. So yeah, check out the sponsor in the link in the description below. Okay, so in order for you to see why Ability Haste is completely misunderstood, you need to break your preconceived notions about it. The most common question I get is why I'm buying so much haste. Why are you buying so much haste? It has diminishing returns. You're just wasting your money. This sort of thinking stems from the fact that Ability Haste used to be called cooldown reduction, or CDR. Cooldown reduction was one of the most broken things that ever existed in League of Legends because of how the formula is calculated.
So as you see in the clip right now, I use that ultimate, and the second the shadow expires, take a look, the ultimate is up in literally under a second.
This is precisely why they changed it over time, because it was very, very difficult to balance, and why it was capped at 40% and 45% if you use Cosmic Insight. The beauty of the old cooldown reduction is that it gained more value the more you had it. So every subsequent percent point you would get, it would give you even more value. You can still easily see this by converting Ability Haste into cooldown reduction. That's something we're going to look at right now. I will show you the official formula, how to calculate it, and then I'm going to give you a trick to actually shorthand it and understand Ability Haste on the fly intuitively. To get the cooldown reduction number, you take haste over haste plus 100 and then times 100. So for a basic example, if you have 100 haste, it ends up being 100 over 200, which is just 1/2 times 100, that's 50. So then you get to 50%. So 100 haste is 50% cooldown reduction. And the big thing to understand here is that if you reduce your cooldown by 50%, you're essentially doubling your base ability output because you get twice as many abilities. Okay, so now why cooldown reduction was beyond broken is that if you would be able to buy another 25%, which is why they capped it precisely, you would get the 75% cooldown reduction. So that means for the another 25%, you actually get quadruple the ability output because you're reduced by 75%. That means only 1/4 of the cooldown remains. So you get 4 abilities instead of like that baseline 1. Now here's where it gets like really absurd when you start thinking about it. This is the beauty of the math here. Getting another 15% on top of that 75 makes your ability output tenfold, okay? So because you reduce 90%, you can squeeze 10 abilities into 1. Another 5%, and then you get 20 abilities. 20 abilities within the single baseline cooldown. So if you could theoretically imagine 99% reduction, you would be able to do 100 abilities within the 1 baseline cooldown. And then another percent would reach basically the 100% or infinity. For armor and MR case, that would be 100% reduction, which means 0 damage taken. That's precisely why it goes like that. And this is called Asymptotic Scaling. And there's a very good beefy video about it by Right Step. It's a very solid video explaining concept, so it's going to be linked in the description if you want to understand it more, which we will not need anymore for the purpose of this video. I'm just showing you the official formula and why it works exactly how it works, why the behavior arises. Now that is some math and formulas, but if you don't really want to think about this a lot, this is how you're going to understand the haste. Your ability haste is a number of how many more abilities you can get in percentages. It's really simple. So if you have 50 ability haste, that means you get 50% more abilities. That means you get another half an ability. That's why haste is like normalized. It's normalized normalizing the curve, and it's very, very easy to work with. So if you have 100 ability haste, you get 100% more abilities, which means twofold the output. And if you remember what we talked about earlier, 100 ability haste is 50% CDR. If you get to like 400 ability haste, you get 4 more abilities. You get another 4 abilities in the original cooldown, which is 400 haste equals 80% CDR. So that means 5 abilities within the original cast. Okay, now why is this like rank 1 season 16 US yapping? Why is he yapping so much about these obscure percentages and numbers? Who cares? Well, I do. I care. You should too. And let me show you why. I'm gonna show you one of the most interesting builds I've discovered during last season. It worked better with the high AP Horizon focus because it was a better as item number 1 due to very high AP and not reliance on the percent bonus, whereas now it relies on the percent bonus, so you want to buy second or third. What I do is I take these runes and I take these 2 initial items. You get 10 ability haste from the Transcendence. You get 15 ability haste on normal abilities with the Legend Haste. You take plus 8 ability haste on the runes. And now we're already at 33, and that's just runes. That is 1/3 of an ability more in an extended fight. So in extended fight, we're essentially increasing our damage output by 33%. It actually goes way beyond that when you do combinatorics and like the value of abilities that are synergizing with each other and enhance each other's value in numerous different ways, which we're going to go into later. But that's just very simple way to understand it. And then you just finish the Horizon Focus to get that spike, and then you finish Archangel, which will convert perfectly in time. When you get the 2-item spike, you get the Lucidity Boots. Okay, so now those 2 items are 25 ability haste each, which is 50 plus the boots 10. That's 93 total ability haste plus blue buff, which you're supposed to secure in the mid to late game, and that's 103. That's just an absurd number. 103 ability haste with 2 items. Why this is so absurd is that we talked about the percentages before in the cap. You would get like maybe 1 person reaching the cap in the game back in the day of 45%. And 45 is an absurd amount. With this, we get slightly over 50% because 100 ability haste is 50% CDR. So if you paid attention when I described the formulas earlier and explained them, the trick to understanding haste, now we know what it means. This means I basically get double the raw output of my abilities. In extended fights, this has insane value. And that's not even mentioning the weakness windows being shorter. For example, if you toss an ability, your weakness window is like shorter because enemies have less time to punish you because your defensive abilities and your zoning abilities are going to come back up. This is just true for basically every character. After clearing the waves, you're combat ready much faster. You get crazy value from stacking abilities. For example, VelKoz has a passive mechanic where 3 ability procs are a passive proc, which is true damage. More rotations means more true damage proc, more passives proc, okay? Another value is seeding the abilities, which means that if you have 3 abilities up instead of 2 or 1, you're much more likely to actually hit all of them because you can use one ability to seed the positioning and get the other ability landed. Most terrible clips in League of Legends, like Nidalee is too tanky, all of these clips really happen when people are getting their cooldowns 1 by 1 and they start tossing abilities out of sync without regards to one another.
Nah, fuck that shit, man. He's too tanky.
Abilities, especially in mages and like casters and basically everybody, but in general, the abilities are synergistic. They have more value when they're done together. You can use your Q to slow enemies and then that guarantees the EW. You can hit enemies with the E and then guarantees the WQ. If you have 3 abilities, you're much more likely to land all 3 instead of getting 1 by 1 up. And then you shoot a Q, enemy dodges it, and then your W comes back up. Then you toss a W, it hits first part, not the second part. Then you get the E and then you miss the E because enemy just dodge it. And you just did 0 damage output. None of it. There's just no combination. Whereas if you had all 3 or like the cooldowns were shorter, you can wait 1 second, boom, you combine all 3 perfectly and then you get a very nice combo. All of these are just crazy values that stack on top of each other. Now I'm going to do some mathing to show you the raw power output, and I'm going to take a very radical example here. Something that's like expensive and you're not really going to get it very often, like Luden's Death Cap. Luden's Death Cap gives you 300 ability power and 10 ability haste. This is a more expensive build than the second build I'm going to show you, and it's just less reliable. You never really do this, but just to compare the raw power. So that's 300 AP on 2 items versus you get Horizon and Archangel. That is 165 AP and 50 ability haste. So you're basically getting double the AP, but on the other build you get 40 haste. We're not even going to go into the effects of the items here, and we're going to negate that even though the second build has way more value. So full combo on VelKoz, Q, W, E, and R, procs the passive twice for 60% AP ratio, hits the Q for 90% AP ratio, both W's for 50% 55, 1E for 30%, and full ult with 125. So let's say you miss like a couple of ticks of ult, it comes up to 400%, just for the sake of math. 400% gives you 4x your ability power. So in the Luden's Death Cap scenario, it gives you another 1,200 bonus damage. That is a crazy amount. Just on the raw scalings, provided you landed everything, you get 4 times your ability haste. That's 1,200 bonus damage. Now in the Horizon and Archangel, this measly AP gets you to 660 bonus damage only. So that seems like you get twice the value. It's absurd. And this is usually the aspect that's very easy for people to understand. It's very intuitive. You get ability power, you can just look at the ratios, that's how much damage you get. This is, again, not even talking about like higher chance, higher likelihood of landing abilities, the more abilities you have, and such. But let's go with this. This is 2 item spikes, so let's assume you're about level 13, when you usually get 2 items. So that I'm gonna use the ability scaling on level 13, maxed out Q and W. So now, 2 passive procs times 137.35 damage, Q for 240 baseline, W for 275 if you hit both procs, E 70, and ult 700 damage. So that's 1,559 damage on base abilities. So in total, to get the damage, you take the baseline and combine it with like build number 1 and 2. Build number 1 ends up being on 2,759 damage, and the build number 2 does 2,219. So even here, you get much better initial burst, okay? You get better initial burst on the build number 1. So now we're gonna add the haste multiplier to get the raw extended damage output. So build number 1 has consistent damage of 2,759 plus another 10%. Because of the 10 haste, you're gonna do 10% more abilities for the extended period of time. So that's another 275. That gets you to 3,034. Build number 2 has consistent damage of 2,219, but it has 50 haste, which is another 50% more abilities consistently. That means that the consistent damage goes up to 3,328 because you add another half of the baseline damage. If you look at this, with the ability haste, you're actually going to do more consistent damage over time. So if you're not specifically relying on that one burst, which is something you're almost never relying on, especially on a consistent controlling character, your idea is to be as consistent as possible, have as many ults as possible, have as many abilities up as possible when your teammates do decide to engage. So you actually get more damage. You actually get 10% more damage on the secondary build. If you really want to test this out, I implore you, take build number 1, take build number 2, build them in a couple of games, and then feel the difference in the control you're able to exert on the game. And now I'm going to teach you exactly when you should buy it. We gotta talk about the damage thresholds. The general rule of thumb is when you're ahead, i.e. you've reached the threshold, killing enemy squishies in about 1 rotation and killing enemy tanks in 2 to 3 rotations. Then you just want to spam utility and survivability. These are the most impactful things you can buy. When ahead, buy ability haste. Trust me on this. It is by far the best thing you can do in any given game because it ups your consistency so much that you exert your impact and control over the game. You need to buy Banshees, you need to buy Zhonya's, you need to buy Horizon Focus for vision and haste, you need to buy Criploom for healing your team, shredding the pen, and then also haste. These are the best things you can do. This will lower the amount of weak point windows, which will render enemies' chance of making a comeback completely negligible. It will give you more control. One consideration to think about is when you're really behind in a game, then you have to make a very difficult choice, and you will likely end up going glass cannon, and that will be the most correct thing. There's no time for ability haste stacking when you're really behind. Ability haste is a luxury stat that you should be buying every game if you're on pace or ahead, because it's investing into the future. But if you're behind, you don't really know if you have a future. It's all about that one initial proc, one initial burst. So you want to buy as much power as possible. If you're incapable of eliminating squishies in 1 to 2 rotations, then you're kind of useless. This is for every champ. If you're Zed, if you're Kiana, if you're J4, if you're VelKoz, if you're Syndra, it doesn't matter. If you cannot burst the squishies, don't bother for consistency. You gotta go glass cannon. I remember there's the old meme of going back to lane, returning with nothing but a glowing mote, but it is actually one of the most efficient items you can buy. Glowing mote is one of the best items in the game. In fact, when you leave the base with low money, you can buy glowing mote, and it will reduce the ultimate cooldown by 5 seconds of your next ult. If you're Karthus, it will reduce it by 10 seconds. You buy for 250, and then, even if you don't build the item, you can sell it for 175. You lose 75 gold in the process, while reaping all the benefits, having 5% more abilities during the lane, during the fights, and having your ult shorter cooldown. So yeah, glowing mote, It's the best item in the game. I honestly believe Ability Haste is just the most misunderstood and best stat in the game. And I low-key did wait to make this video. Didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. But yeah, you guys can go nuts and abuse Ability Haste. Become a glowing Mote enjoyer. And that's about it for today. Appreciate all of you and see ya.